Welcome to another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. If you have career goals that include getting a promotion, getting a pay raise, and making the most out of every job offer, then you're going to love today's guest, who is going to give us her insights from both an employee and an employer perspective. I'm Adriana Herrera, your PayDestiny podcast host and founder of PayDestiny, a new platform for women and underrepresented professionals to access tools to build skills and confidence to get that promotion, pay raise, and reach career goals. I'm so excited to introduce you to Sara Inés Calderón. Let me tell you more about her. Sara is an entrepreneur and engineering lead based in Austin, Texas. She began her career as a newspaper journalist, transitioned into digital media, then software. Now she works on the bleeding edge of tech and builds inclusive tech teams. Since 2015, she's worked with Women Who Code Austin and launched her own app development firm, Tercera, in 2020. She is most currently interested in cybersecurity. Please help me welcome to the PayDestiny podcast, Sara Inés Calderón. Welcome, Sara. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be a part of something that's really trying to help empower women. So I'm here for it.
Awesome. And so again, we just want to let everyone know that Sara is going to be providing us her insights both from an employee and employer perspective. And Sara, just so people have a better understanding of what that really means, can you share with us just the sizes of the companies that you've worked with? Because those viewpoints really change whether you're in a corporate, publicly traded company or you're at a startup. So what lens will you be sharing with us today?
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. So yeah, my experience is all with small companies. And by small, I mean less than a dozen people. And so I've been working at startups that have been about, that are all been that size for more than 10 years. So small teams, teams that get all up on each other, but that can also, really jive and produce and be one.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So will be really great insights for anyone who is currently in a startup or thinking about joining the startup. There's so many benefits to being in a startup. Yeah. You get freedom and autonomy. You get equity upsides that can be life-changing. There's that story of the guy who painted the mural for Facebook, who, he just spray painted. I think he got 0.001% of equity and now is like a multimillionaire for painting a mural early on. So startups definitely come with their pros and cons. Mm-hmm. So let's just dive right in. So Sara, tell us about your first professional job. What was it? What did you do? And did you negotiate your first job offer?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start out of college because I did have jobs, in high school and whatnot. But yeah, so when I graduated from college, I went to work as the immigration and Mexico reporter at the Brownsville Herald in South Texas. And I did not negotiate my job offer, mostly because I didn't know how all that worked. I think that's something that is, that is common. I see folks talk about it. My family, my grandparents immigrated here from Mexico, and most of my aunts and uncles became teachers, went to college and things like that. But there wasn't a lot of conversation around professional life when I was growing up. So I didn't know that. I did negotiate for my second job though.
Yeah.
Learned fast.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I didn't know that you could negotiate your job offers at all until I was actually out of the nonprofit sector. I started my career in the national nonprofit sector. My first job was actually building an inclusive program for a youth organization that served 12,000 youth. They were about to be sued by parents whose kids were being turned away. And I had the experience, and I have an older brother who's developmentally delayed. So I had the life experience, the education and behavioral psychology, and some of the jobs I had in college. They gave me the opportunity right out of college to build this program that saved them millions, tens of millions of dollars in a lawsuit and I wasn't even being paid $30,000. So grossly underpaid. And it wasn't until I got into, the corporate for good world where I realized that that was a thing. So tell us about your first moment actually learning about that. How did you learn that you could even negotiate a job offer? And then how did you approach it when you went to do it the first time, and did it work out for you?
Sure. So that's a great question. So one thing I would say straight up, and I think in California, this is now illegal, but don't ever tell anyone how much money you're making. Anyone who you're interviewing with, recruiters, hiring managers, don't ever say that. When they ask you how much you're looking for, the first thing you should ask is, well, what is budgeted for this position? Or what is this position pay? Because then that's going to tell you a lot more that it's going to give you information you need to negotiate, right? Like if they're going to give you some low ball offer, you're going to be like, well, I don't want to work here anyway.
Right.
Like I'm just going to use this as a practice interview because they're not being serious with this job offer or whatever. So I don't even remember how I was also getting paid less than $30,000 out of college. Stupid. I didn't know, whatever. Yeah. But, luckily,
grateful to have a job.
Yeah. And it didn't have a lot of expenses, so it was fine. But I don't remember how I found out you could negotiate, but the reason I brought that up the first time was they asked me how much I was making. And so then they offered me, they offered me like $10,000 more than that. And then when I tried to negotiate, they were like, no, because they had something on me because they knew that I was going to be making more. So anyway, I would say over time, my negotiation skills did improve. But ultimately, what I would say is that in technology, I'm a software engineer by trade. I would say that the thing that has helped me the most to be able to get more money is literally just expertise and experience, right? Because, women in general, I think Latinas in particular, are such a rare commodity, and everybody loves to toot their own horns about diversity. So I think I have that going for me, but also I have a very particular niche and a lot of years of experience in that niche. And because I've worked a lot of contracts, I have a lot more experience with a lot more apps. So when I tell people, I'm like, no, I want this much, they're like, oh, they're not going to try to lowball me. They'll say, we can't afford that, so it's been really helpful. So, but I've also had experiences where I'm doing my part to negotiate. But if you're negotiating with, it's always a man, it's always a white man. If you're negotiating with a white man who thinks that you're not worth that much, there's nothing that you have in your power that will convince them that you are. And so I just want to share that for the folks here, because I think for a while I was like, why am I not good at negotiating? And it's not, I think that that's some grace you can give yourself, is that you cannot control 100% of the variables in a given situation. And if you're dealing with someone who just doesn't see your value, there's no negotiation tactic that will convince them that you have value. So that's my overall negotiating and salary, what's it called? Advice. And then the one last thing I would say in terms of if you don't have that much experience, one way to kind of give yourself a little bit more gravitas as you start looking for jobs or as you prepare to move in your career, blogging, conference talks, all that stuff. Put that stuff on LinkedIn, put that stuff on your resume, meetups, like I said, meetups, organize events, do all of that kind of stuff, because that lends credibility, that lends expertise to you. So if you don't have the years, you can kind of show, look at my expertise in these other ways. And I think that can apply to any field, not just engineering.
So building out that personal brand and getting that third party credibility where they're
Yes.
like, hey, you're good enough to be on our stage to talk to our audience about this. Maybe you don't have the years experience, but you have enough knowledge that's going to be
Yes.
valuable and you can turn to that. I think that's a really great piece of advice. How would you say, so you shared with us a little bit about your experiences early on negotiating job offers and a type of personality of person who's just going to maybe just not hear anything at all of what you're saying because of a bias.
Yeah.
As an employer yourself, let's look at this from a different angle.
Sure.
So if someone's coming in, you're giving them a job offer. And what are you looking for in their negotiation, if anything? And what are some things, maybe you've had an experience where someone comes in and they're just like, I want this. Give me this, and you're just completely turned off. I know I've had that experience, but I want to hear and just see from your lens as an employer, because you shared the employee side, how does it differ, if at all?
Sure. So I'm just gonna, that's a great question. I'm gonna preface this by saying that I'm a small business, right? When I'm hiring people, either through Tercera or through the startups where I've worked. I mean, we're talking, you know, not huge budgets. And we're also talking, you know, hourly rates with caps and things like that. So just to be fully transparent, right? That's the perspective that I'm coming from. That being said, what I want to see, and actually the first time I did negotiate my second job offer, even though they didn't give it to me, I was negotiating with a woman who was going to be my editor. And she's like, I'm so glad you asked. Women just don't ask. And I was like, well, it didn't do me much good.
Hey, you want to change your answer a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. But I think, especially if you're new to negotiating, like you have to kind of stop and think about the other side of the table, right? Like the people who are interviewing you, it is not their job to interview people, and they have other work to do and they have other things to be doing. So it's so much easier for them to just hire you. If you get to the point where there's an offer, they would so much rather hire you, especially if it's like a smaller, medium-sized business, because they don't have time and it's expensive. It takes like thousands and thousands of dollars worth just of people's time, let alone how much they're paying recruiters and whatnot to get to you. So you can ask, definitely ask, always ask. And whether that's, you know, I want to start in a month, or what are the things you can negotiate for? I want to start in a month, you know, whatever. So that's what I would say. And I would say the same thing is for me, is like, I went through all these LinkedIn profiles, went and read all the stuff, and I already have my short list, right? And so like, I know these folks. And so then it's like, if you're on the phone, what I'm looking for is, you know, and maybe this is, since I'm a geriatric millennial, this is definitely going to date this podcast with that term, but you know, I think I'm kind of like a little bit perhaps more old fashioned is what I'm trying to say than the folks that I'm hiring usually. I like a little bit of professionalism, you know, we're not friends, and potentially you're going to have to talk to people you don't know, right? And so I've had conversations with people that were very off-putting, and usually men, I'm not going to lie. I think that's a really good indicator for me, is if it's a man and they're not completely rude to me or dismissive, you know, that's a good sign as an engineering lead. The
bar is low then, is that what
the bar is low? The bar is so low for men, but I've literally had men tell me, like, before I can even like interrupt me in my intro, to be like, well, I just want to know how much this pays, because or just very rude. Obviously don't do that. Also, I think when people, you know, I think it's good when you have questions. I've literally hired someone when I was on the fence about, because they were like, well, what about this? And what about this? They were good, thoughtful questions, right? I was like, oh, this person went and did some work and thought about it, and, you know, thought about it to the point where like they really kind of want to picture themselves here. So that's really helpful. And then I think, especially, I mean, this is, I think for engineering, but I think you can extrapolate to other things, is you have to and I wish that this were the case everywhere you go. But for me personally, I make sure like, what kind of person do I want? And then what questions do I have to ask that person to find them?
Mhm.
And so for me, for engineering, again, with like not a lot of resources, we can't hire the best engineer. So I'm looking for someone who wants to be the best engineer.
The
And so
potential to learn.
on the other side of the table, you say, based on the questions these people are asking me, is there room to grow, or do they want me to hit the ground running, right? Like that's a good, you can glean kind of a little bit about like, based on the questions they're asking me, what kind of a team is this? What kind of a job would this be? What are the expectations here, right? Because if they expect you to know everything already, then if you don't know something, how is that going to go for you there? Like,
Right?
so yeah, so that's, I think kind of, did that answer your question? Is there
Yeah.
anything else I can add?
Yeah, definitely. I like the point that you brought up of thinking about the job offer, trying to extend an offer that someone is going to be willing to accept. But then from the employer side, having the job candidate mindful of the fact that we're trying to find the best person possible, and it is costing us serious money to fill that seat with the right person. It is what I refer to as a high stakes gamble, because as
Yeah,
employers, there are so many things we can't do and can't ask because they're illegal, like, prior
sure,
wages. We can't even ask, how did they really do at the job before? There's only certain
sure,
questions that we can ask. And, for anyone listening, the actual dollars in that. So if you're a minimum wage employee, it costs an average of $3,600 to hire you.
oh wow,
And if you are coming in mid-level, or mid-level or higher, it's 6 to 9 months of that salary that you will be earning. So
wow,
that's how much is actually it takes and to hire someone and
sure,
train them and bring them on. So as employers, if we're having a revolving door, well, we might be making money, but then we're losing profitability on the
yeah,
back end because we have that turnover. So I think that's a really great point that you bring up, because often as employees, when we're going in there, we're not thinking about that at
sure.
all. And so I really value that point that you brought up. So let's talk a little bit about that going from your career. You shared about getting job offers, negotiating that both from the employee and employer perspective side. Share a little bit about the first moment you thought about, intentionally about moving up in your career, and what did that
Sure.
really mean? Was it moving up because you wanted more pay? Was it moving up because you wanted that title? You wanted that leadership responsibility?
Sure.
What was that moment, and what did that actually look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, just for context, again, like engineering is my third career.
Okay. I love
So, when I was a journalist, there was a very kind of, or had been a very developed path, which is like you go to a small paper, you go to a medium paper, and then you go to a big paper, right? And I was on that path. And then 2009 happened and all the journalists lost their jobs. So I had to make a choice, and I decided that I was going to change careers. And then I did digital media, and I kind of like, it was definitely like, I would say that there was an element of prestige, but there was also like money, obviously, because the older you get, the more you realize how expensive life is.
Yeah.
So, I did that for a while and I started to do well. And then I got laid off. And, I kind of realized at that point also, like, I need something that's going to kind of dovetail with my interests, which have been media, and also something that will provide me with a life that isn't prone to such tumultuousness. Most of the journalists I know are either just periodically unemployed every 2 years or have transitioned into communications and other things like that. So that being said, once I got into engineering, I really did not know what to expect as far as the career path. That's what I would suggest. In general, associations or groups can be really helpful. I learned a lot just by listening to the Women and Women Who Code, Austin, talk about their, or being able to ask questions or being able to go to happy hours and chat people up, because no one in my family does high tech stuff.
Yeah.
And, nobody's nobody's silly enough to work at startups except for me. So like I didn't really have anyone to give me advice. So what I would suggest is, yeah, like whether it's engineering or some other thing, find a association, a group, something where you can find peers and get that peer level advice, because especially when you're starting off, you need the peer level advice. Like, I think when you talk to people who are like in the corporate world, like find a mentor. I'm like, nobody has time for that shit. Like that is such bad advice, sorry, I don't know if we have potty mouth in here. So what I would say is when you're starting out, what you really want is advice from your peers or from mid-level people. Once you're in the mid-level, you can start to, you have more context and you can start to get that other advice. But so for me, once I became an engineer, I didn't really know what I was doing. So at first I was like, oh my God, I need a job. So then I got a job and it was terrible. And then I was like, I need to get out of this job. And then I got to another startup and that was also terrible.
What makes it terrible?
So the first job was a consulting company that had been formed by a bunch of bros in like the 90s. And they rode that pre.com thing together. And then they all hung on afterwards together. And it was just like really sexist and racist.
Terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. And then the other one, they told me they were feminists and they really want to be feminists, but there was just it was basically a cult of I mean, like a lot of startups is a cult of personality. And what I mean by that is the whole business rotated around this one person's personality and how he was feeling and what he thought. So like, I had no structure. They told me they were going to onboard me and teach me things. They never taught me shit. And so it was basically like in there hanging on, desperately trying to survive and perform, but I didn't really know what I was performing to, and there was no structure, and it was just, and then, eventually they ran out of money. So shocker.
Yeah.
And so I got laid off. And then I took a beat and I was just like, well, what do I want to do? I was like, do I want to go do, augmented reality? Do I want to go do user experience design, or do I want to do mobile? And I was like, kind of like mobile, like, and so that's really when that was 4 years ago. And that's really when I started getting into, making mobile apps. And so at that point I was like, okay, like I'm 2 to 3 years into my career at this point.
Yeah.
2 and change. And so I'm like, okay, like, how am I going to do this? Right. And so like, I started interviewing at like, more corporate places, thinking, oh, I have to be responsible and I have to go make money, but these places are also like crushing my soul. I had an interview at like a Fortune 100 company or something. I literally left and was like screaming and crying in my car because it was it was like literally like if you're talking and someone's like explaining to you how to speak English for like 4 hours. It was horrific. And so I kind of ended up in this place where I was like, you know what? I want to really learn these skills so that I can go and charge a bunch of money for them. So I worked at a startup. I ended up going to a startup where at least they left me alone and I was able to build a team and learn. So that's what I would say is like, once you get to that mid-level point, you can decide, do I want to go and learn some skills and maybe not make money? Do I want to go and make money? Do I want to change career paths? Because that's the thing about, I would say anything related to media or technology, you can always like slightly flip the script, right? Depending on like what direction you want to go in.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so then, once you kind of become mid-senior, you have a lot more options and it's a lot easier to diverge, right? Like I'm really interested in cybersecurity now. And so like, because I know how to do, mobile and web apps, I could become like an app security person, right? And so you just have more options. So yeah, so I would say overall, in terms of structuring your career, if you're new, look for those peer groups and get advice from junior, and mid people. Once you are in that mid space, you give yourself some options. You don't have to keep going in the same thing just because you're getting promoted or just because people want you to. You can choose other things, right? Take stock of like, do I like this? Do I want to make money? Like, what do I want? And then once you get into the senior thing, I would say the same thing, right? Like, I know people who are like architects, senior level people who are like, I want to try being a manager. Like, you can always change. So yeah. So is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. It's there's a lot in there. One thing that's standing out for me is this idea of, as we're in our careers, especially when we're younger and we're starting out, we tend to be in this earning mode.
Yeah.
Where we're just like, hey, we're out of college. Maybe some of us had debt. Maybe, we're just trying to get our first apartment or whatever it is. And so getting that first paychecks in,
Yeah.
we're happy to have it. And we're also happy to kind of just be learning on the job.
Yeah.
And then we get to this point where we're more mid-level. And then there's that learning aspect of learning both about our own likes and dislikes for the career that we want, but then also learning and expanding our growth and getting up and moving up into those next positions. And I really parallels with something that Jesus Chavez, another guest on the PayDestiny podcast, referred to as just like the sweet spot for all of us is to be in learning and earning mode, where we're actually earning as much as we possibly can be earning, but then be happy learning and growing our skills at the same time. And that's like optimum in his mind of where we should be. And so it's really mirroring some of those ideas, and that's what's coming up. Thinking about your career growth and how you have grown, how, especially working at startups, because startups are such a unique beast, and they do have their own cultures, and there is so much opportunity to grow. And grow skills within the startup environment, especially as an engineer. But then there's also these moments where maybe you just stop growing because of the culture and the environment that you might be in. For you, because you were able to go on to successfully start your own app development company. And there are like, every new day, a new door is opening for an app development company.
Sure.
So you have a book of clients, or clients are pulling you in to work full time for them because they love you, because you are a skilled engineer. So what did that jump, how did that jump happen? I guess I'm more curious. Was there a point where you went from a new entry-level engineer to like a mid-level? Was there like a title change? Was there like an element of perception and external, like you all of a sudden had some more accolades, that type of thing? Like where along the value chain, like did that happen for you?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So what I kind of want to preface that with is, so I've had an LLC since 2012.
Okay.
And it's called Tercera Generación. So it's actually, the same company. So what I would say is, for any of your, listeners, your audience, I would say, I had an uncle, my tío Chente, who told me like over 10 years ago, you should have an LLC, because if you have an LLC, you can write things off for your business. And, basically what he was saying is you can make more money because you're not paying as much taxes.
Right.
But, which varies. I have not had that experience every year since I started the company. But what I would say is that I think having an LLC has given me a lot of freedom. And to answer your question, I was able to, once I kind of got into that, once I made a decision that was startup, to your point with startups, you do get a lot, but there's also a lack. There's a lack of many things in startups. But if you go in with the expectation of like, I'm going to get this, and this out of this experience, and then I'm going to get out of here and go get paid, that can really work for you. And so in my experience, I was like, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to like try out all the stuff I want to try out that no one's going to hire me to do, like being, mobile engineer, like building a team, like building a project management, process, like building a documentation process. And so now everywhere I go, everyone's like, you're so good at documentation. You're so good at like, right. Cause I took advantage of that opportunity. So yeah, to answer your question, I think once I kind of had 2 or 3 experiences where I was like, man, I just keep building all this shit for white guys. Like I should build something for myself. Like, why am I giving away all my expertise and labor so someone else can profit? Because, that's dumb, Sara. So, I decided really what I decided to do was repackage my LLC into, a company. And, ultimately my company, has been really cool. It's been a really great, I think, experience for me because it really helped me understand that 1, I don't just have to be building wealth for other people. And 2, that I can build things and I can build wealth on my own terms. And, the thing about Tercera is like, I want to work with people of color and communities of color. I want to mentor engineers in those communities, young engineers. And then every time I get paid, I give back. And I think, and it depends. I mean, obviously with everything going on, I've been giving a lot of money to the food bank, but, I give to just like different organizations that are trying to empower, those communities. And so like, I now am at a point where I'm like, why wouldn't I do business this way? Now I'm at a point where a friend of mine and I, who are just exhausted from like having to, I literally, as I mentioned to you earlier, I had a fight over Slack with some dude for like an hour to convince him that there was a better way to do something. And at the end, he's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm like, what the fuck? So, we're all exhausted. There's a whole army of exhausted female engineers in this industry. And so a friend of mine are like, okay, cool. Like, can we build a coalition? Can we build a co-op of like women who want to build technology? And like, what does that look like? Is that going to be working for, is that state contracts or federal contracts? And like, that's, where I'm at, because I just like I'm happiest. And by happiest, I mean the least frustrated when I'm building things in this way, right? With people who want to be there and want to be learning from me, with, clients who appreciate that I'm there, who appreciate that I'm, working with them, and, in a way that can like give back to communities that have given, so much already. And, I'm just at the point now because I have expertise, and I'm at the point now because, which I'm very lucky, where I'm just like, well, okay, I'm just going to be on LinkedIn for the next few weeks till I find something, and something comes up. So, that's where my life is now. So now I get to choose like in what manner do I want to conduct business, right? And if I am so privileged as a woman, as, the daughter, the granddaughter of immigrants, as all of these things, I'm so privileged to have that opportunity to choose. Why the fuck wouldn't I choose? And so that's what I would really say about, starting your own LLC and kind of starting. You don't have to like have your own company, but you can also say like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this side gig so that I can build up my savings. So if I don't like you, I'm going to quit, because life is too short to be suffering so that I can build wealth for you or whatever. I did a lot of side gigs under that LLC before I kind of created a entity around it. So, yeah. So short version, I created the LLC a long time ago because I think you can, for example, you buy a computer, boom, that's a write-off.
Right.
Like I had to, I work from home. I had to upgrade, I had to do really boring grown-up stuff this year, like replace all the AC ducts in the house. That's my office. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's really smart to have an LLC just for reasons like that. But I would say also it gives you the opportunity to start thinking about like, how do I want to do business? If I could make my own company, boom, I have my own company. How do I want to conduct business, and what world do I want to see, so yeah.
How do you think? So you shared a little bit about some of the things you didn't have access to in regards to knowledge from your
Mhm.
family, and then your tío Chente, who gave you this huge, tip to start
Yeah.
LLC. How do you think your background as a Mexican American has helped or hindered your professional career?
Sure. So I think definitely it's helped me. I think for better or for worse, that work ethic, man. Like my abuelito Chente, que en paz descanse, used to tell me like, you just, I'll say it in English for the benefit of everyone, but like you just go in there and you work 110%. And this is something I tell my partners. I'm like, I never have anyone tell me your work is not good, you're not working enough. That is never the critique I have. The critique I have is, I don't like how you said that. Right?
Feelings.
Yes, I'm always hurting men's feelings. But yeah, and so I think, truth be told, right? Like I'm not on some pedestal. Like I'm not the best engineer, man. Like I don't have a computer science degree. Like I do not spend my weekends learning about all this extra stuff. Like I am a practical like worker. And so working hard, unfortunately, has been the way that I have progressed, because I'm not a genius. I know people who are genius engineers, and that's great. I see them, I'm like, man, they're amazing, and I'm never going to be as smart as them. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because I was able to get there a different way. I would say also the entrepreneurial thing, like, and this is something I've thought about a lot. My abuelito Chente was an entrepreneur, and it was until a few years ago that I was like, holy shit, my abuelito was an entrepreneur, because we don't think about entrepreneurs in that way. That he like, so, he had chickens, so he'd sell eggs, and he like had chihuahuas, so he'd sell puppies, and he always had, these little things going on. And his son, my tío Chente, he was like, okay, I'm gonna have my career as a teacher, and then I'm gonna have a side business so that I can, build wealth. I was talking to an old friend from the newspaper industry yesterday, and he's like, he's got a consulting business, he invests in real estate, and he's got a full-time job. So it's like, I think that I got a lot out of that, right? And I think for me personally, I mean, let's break the thing here, is like, I am white as fuck. I am a white person, and nobody ever believes, or white people,
You
like,
get
you
that.
can't be Mexican.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, man, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna fight you on this. So I'm white. That being said, I think a lot about my culture is very important to me, right? Like my father was always very he raised me to be proud of who I was. My grandparents, were proud of who they were. And so I think when in startups and technology, I found myself in so many super fucking hostile environments. And I will say, like, knowing that inside, I was not ashamed of who I was or who my family was or anything, really helped me out. That helped me float, because I mean, first day, first tech job, the the white dad with pants from Costco, right, comes up, and he's just like, it's so great to have a girl on the team. And he had Googled me, and he had found some articles I wrote about Latino stuff. Why'd you write about this Latino stuff? So it's like, boom, my first day, some sexist ass shit, some racist ass shit.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm like, holy moly, like, how long am I stuck here? And I was stuck there for quite some time. So, those are the kinds of environments that I ended up in. And if it hadn't been for, what I'm going to call, my Mexican American culture, like, work hard, always move forward, build something for yourself, be proud of who you are. Like those are the things that got me through all of that, because I have been unemployed. I have been crying on my couch watching the X-Files. I mean, like, I've been, there's been failures. We're skipping over all the times I failed, right? In this interview. So yeah.
The idea that, well, over the last 4 years, and some of this is changing now, but it has gone a little underground, of the stereotype of the lazy Mexican is something that I have never understood, because I firmly believe that my epigenetics, that came from my abuelitas, that it's literally ingrained in my DNA to work and work extremely hard, to the point where I will work 14, 16-hour days, which is not sustainable. And my friends are like, you look like you've been partying a lot. Like, where have you been going? And I'm like, I've just been working. Like, that's not a good sign that you're telling me I look like crap because you think I'm out there partying. But for me, this idea and this perception that people have of specifically lazy Mexicans is something that I can't wrap my brain around, because exactly what you're just saying is like, there's all these side hustles, but we're not thinking about it as entrepreneurship, because that's part of the culture. Like my madrina, my godmother, has always been, with her little side gigs, whether it was selling clothes, or she would get into these like pyramid, like, which would turn out to be pyramid schemes, but like selling mirrors or something. And then she'd realize go on. My cousins, my primas, they, baking cakes, once they get out of work, making their lip glosses, like whatever it is, it's part of who we are. And when we look at where that comes from, it comes from south of the border. And if people go and they travel down there, I mean, you will see the way that the country is structured. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a welfare system. So if you don't work, you don't eat. And so that's why you do see children who do their schooling in the morning, and then the afternoon they're selling the chicles and the juegos and the little things out there, because they are not contributing to the family, they are not eating. And so this idea of this lazy Mexican makes no sense to me. But then when we're taking this work ethic that's ingrained in us, and now we're first generation going into corporate America, where in some senses we're taught to be thankful to have a job, and not really coming in with these skills and these even notions that you can negotiate a job offer. And how do you do that? And when you are, that sometimes the person sitting across the table from you is just going to not even be able to wrap their brain around the fact that you're a woman, you are Latina, a Mexican American Latina, who can contribute to this, but because of this idea of who they think you are, their dollar value will never match. And so I appreciate everything you just said, because it's just so honest, and to your experiences, and thinking about the world of tech, especially as women, there are it's a different world to navigate, but there are some pros, and there's always the cons, and as you mentioned, the failures, which unfortunately we don't have time to touch on through them, and I've had many, and many a tears as well, but in different ways. I want to touch on, or actually move to, I should say, our game. Which is our situation game of instincts. And it's actually the perfect segue, because we were just beginning to touch on different experiences that you had that make up the journey of your career, which is your PayDestiny. And we don't just get out of college, or even some of us who, if listening, didn't go to college, and you just start your career and then you end up moving up, which is now becoming more of a thing for a lot of people. You don't just go from entry level to C-suite overnight. It's made up of many different experiences where you're learning and growing and navigating, the corporate world. And so that's really a little bit of what this game alludes to. So it's a situation game of where I will set a clock for 3 minutes. And the way you win the game is by beating the clock. And so within 3 minutes, I'll provide you 3 situations, and there is no right or wrong answer.
Okay.
How you would respond to the situation. And again, the way that you win is just beating the clock. So do you have any questions on how it's played?
No, I think I got this.
Okay, awesome. So I am going to set my clock.
Okay.
Or timer. So you see 3 minutes.
Yes.
And I'm going to get started, and I will do my best to make it very clear each scenario for you. Okay, fireworks, get set, and go. Scenario 1. Your boss has a history of adding tasks and responsibilities to your role that are not in your job description. To be a team player, you complete the tasks despite them taking an additional 5 hours of uncompensated time and adding that to your weekly schedule. Your coworker has fallen behind, and your boss adds several of their job responsibilities to your already full plate. What do you do?
I start looking for a new job or I quit. That scenario is not going to get better, and no one's paying me to raise a grown ass man.
Got it. Scenario 2. You are in a meeting with 8 other people. The team is trying to problem solve a situation. You offer an idea that your boss acknowledges but moves on from. Within 10 minutes, a colleague repeats your idea and your boss loves it. What do you do?
So this has actually happened to me many times over my career. And where I'm at now, I would say, yeah, actually, Brian, I just said that, and you said you liked the idea. So I'm curious, what did Dave say that made you like it more? Because that's who I am now.
Love it. So, but you wouldn't have said that. Oh, hold on.
I would not have said that. No, that literally has happened to me before, and I would not have said that when I started out. No.
Scenario 3. You're in a meeting with 5 other people where your coworker is praised by your boss for the work that you did. Your coworker does not correct your boss to let them know that you are the one responsible for the work that was completed. What do you do?
Well, I'm assuming that if this is a company that I want to stay at, which sounds like I'm not going to want to stay there for long, I would say, yeah, I just want to add to that was like a really great team effort. And, I would probably fluff it up a little bit to make it more of a team and diffuse that. So yeah, and then I would probably say something privately to that person if I wanted to stay at that job later.
Awesome. And you had 46 seconds left, even with my wanting to ask you a question on the other one.
Ask me a question. I'm just at a point where I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore.
I love it, but you have the experience to do it. And unfortunately, it's, especially being in tech and women and Latinas, and I hate saying that, but those things all do add up in experiences. There's this idea of like paying dues, which I hate.
No.
We really need to get away from. But once we have that portfolio and that track record of success, it's like, sorry, I'm going to move on. You don't have to answer that email. You don't have to take that phone call.
No.
You don't have to do any of that. And I personally love being in that situation now, but I, like you, have had to go and navigate through many of unpleasant situations. But thank you for playing that game. You
absolutely
the clock and reached your PayDestiny.
Well, and just like a real quick note to your audience, like if any of those scenarios is happening to you, that is a toxic workplace, and you need to figure out how to get out of there. You cannot manage up your way out of something like that. That is just a move. The people who are doing those things to you are a moving target, and they are moved solely by their own insecurities. So there's no fixing that.
I think that's a really good advice, because I think sometimes we just try and stick it out, and hoping is going to change. Personally, for me, my experience
I've been there.
Things actually, those were pulled from some of my experiences.
Yeah.
And
I've been there too.
But mine were actually with a team of all Caucasian women that were white polo wearing khakis kids. And I am not that person at all. I am like bright, bold Latina with my, within a professional environment, of course,
Sure.
but definitely came with my differences. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how these situations will both help us learn and then shape us. And I always try and look at it from, that was a horrible experience, but how can I create my team culture to make
Yes.
it the best so other people don't have to go through those experiences that I
Absolutely.
went through.
That's the best possible spin to put on any of those situations.
Right. And so we are running a little short on time, but I want to make sure that we get to your do's and don'ts
Sure.
for getting a promotion and getting a pay raise. So what would your pieces of advice be?
Cool. So yeah, so I would say before you put all of your energy into getting a promotion or getting a pay raise at your current job, make sure, take stock, take inventory. Do I want to stay at this company? Do I want that job? Like, go and talk to that person, be like, what do you do every day? Right? Because I think sometimes in our minds, those jobs are better than they actually are. And my partner is a sales manager. So like, I'm like, that's not what I thought sales managers did, but it's terrible. So yeah, so that's what I would say is make sure that that's the thing that you want, because I think you would agree with me here. You can get a promotion, you can get a pay raise by leaving your job. So make sure that what you want is to get a promotion, figure out where you want the promotion and where you want the pay raise, right? So that being said, what I would say is if you want either a promotion or a pay raise, what you need to do is either at your current company or, Google industry standards, what are the expectations of people who have these job titles, right? And you can find those, right? You can find them on, a myriad of places, right? We're all smart. So, and, I'm just going to give an example. If, being a mid-level engineer or being a senior engineer means you can, troubleshoot, build new things, mentor younger engineers, maintain documentation, and have meetings across different departments, right? Put yourself in a position where you're having meetings with people across just different departments, mentor an intern, make sure you get like a feature and like put your stamp on, like, fill all those things so that when it comes time to have your annual review or whatever, fortunately or unfortunately, I think I've had like 2 or 3 bosses who I would say were my champions, or who wanted me to do well and who told me how to do well. I would say it's, I don't want to say the word naive, but I think if you think your boss is looking out for you, that is naive. You need to be your number one fan, and you need to say like, hey boss, thanks so much for whatever. I wanted to talk to you about this role. I wanted to present my case to you. Do you want to talk about that now? Do you want to talk about that later? And then you go and you do your homework. And like, so I've seen people say things like, keep a file of all your accomplishments so that at the end of the year, you can like write them up. And that's definitely smart. And so it basically goes the same thing with, with a pay raise, right? I mean, you have to have your own data. You have to make your own case, and then you have to figure out like how to craft that case, either through specific requirements at your current employer or through general requirements in your industry. But that's how I would suggest you do it. And then I just, again, want to reiterate that if you do all of those things and you're doing a good job and you don't get that promotion and you don't get that raise, don't be harsh on yourself, because again, there are just some people who, I literally heard the story that like last week, that this woman who's super talented was apparently passed over for a raise or a promotion, and then the folks who are managing her just flat out told her, well, if we give you that title, then our competitor is going to want to hire you, so we're not going to promote you. So, you know what I'm saying? Only to say that there's a lot of reasons you may not get those things that have nothing to do with you. And so if it doesn't work out, I would suggest, I'm a company jumper because again, like, unfortunately I had to face the harsh reality that like these white guys that I'm busting ass for, that I'm getting carpal tunnel for, like, they don't give a fuck. They got their own thing going on at the end of the day. So what am I going to do for myself?
Right.
So if you aren't getting what you want and you've done all those things and you feel like I've done everything I could possibly do to get this promotion, to get this raise, that's when you take all of that energy and put it into LinkedIn and your network and you find yourself the next thing, because there's no reason that you should let some guy, usually it's a guy, some guy who has ideas about what he needs and what he wants from you, get in the way of what you need and want for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Preach. Okay.
Also networking, because then when you leave, you have people you can ask jobs for.
That's one thing I learned early on too, is that it's not always what you know, but who you know.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially within this industry, you can have a huge book of successes, but then at the end of the day, that opportunity will come to you or be closed because of someone that you know. Thank you for sharing all of those insights. I love what you said too about having your list, your recorded list of data, and going into those conversations prepared, because you can actually do that on PayDestiny.com 100% for free. So if anyone listening is like, yes, I got to start doing that, you can create your achievement bank. You can put that data in. We walk you through a really quick formula. You can do 3 achievements within less than 5 minutes each day or each week, so that when you're ready to have those compensation questions and conversations, you are armed with that information, and it's 100% for free. So that's my own little plug there for us.
That's awesome.
Sarah's conversation. Sara, one last question before we wrap up. Knowing everything that you know now, thinking about that first professional job you had, that very first day that you're starting, if you could go back in time and say, hey, you need to know this, like, this is going to serve you so well, and you can only give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
This is before I start the job or when I'm starting the job? This
is like your first day. So you're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, but you have all this experience and knowledge. Basically, you're getting in a time machine, going back in time, and you're telling yourself one piece of advice. What would it be?
I would say that the best piece of advice that I keep giving myself, that I would love to have known then, because it was a really harsh reality when I had to let go of journalism, was have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. And don't, put your heart into plan A, but then if it's not going to work out, put your heart into plan B. Because, like you were saying, I wish, my parents don't really understand my career trajectory, because they picked a career and then they were able to work at that place for 10, 20 years. Right. And I didn't have that opportunity, right? Even if I wanted to, I would get laid off or whatever. And it took me a few careers and a few times to realize it doesn't matter what my job title is. I can choose how I live my life to meet the personal and professional goals that I have for myself. And I didn't know that at the time. So I don't know if it would be don't get too attached to your plan, or you can achieve all of your goals out in or outside of a job, so something along those lines. I don't know how 23-year-old me would have understood, current me.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's being able to be fluid. And I laugh at myself, because when I'm a planner. I love to plan, and I made myself a life plan when I graduated from college, and it included personal, goals and family goals and work goals and retirement goals. And it was every year I had a goal up to 30, and then from 30 to 35, like on and on. And then my life plan went out the door after I left the nonprofit world, went to quote unquote corporate America in Hawaii. And then everything went a different way, and I got into tech and have now built a couple of venture-backed startups, which I never would have thought would be in my life plan. So yeah, definitely changing. What is it? What did someone say? The only thing constant in life is change. To steal that.
Yeah, absolutely. I had friends in high school who were taking AP computer science, and they're like, "Are you gonna take that?" I was like, "I don't even know what that is. Why would I take that?"
I actually did take that, and I will tell you, there was 40 students in the class. We were in the dungeon of the school, 2 girls, me and Caitlin, and this little blonde girl. It was way over my head. You had to have AP Calc. I was not even in AP Calc. I don't know how I got in there. I think I was like the diversity, obviously, because one of 2 girls in the entire class. I remember we used to call each other and be like, "Oh, I'm going to be out sick today because I'm really sick." So that way we can mentally be prepared. 1 to 39, girl to boy, which ended up serving me well going into the tech industry. But I negotiated my grade with the entire, not just the teacher, but the entire class. Because I was honest, I was like, I don't know how I got in here. I'm not in calculus, but I'm here. I can't leave. This is a horrible environment to learn in. They all agreed. I said, I will paint this entire working environment, make it better, and you guys can grade me, and that will be my grade. And somehow I convinced the teacher to do that and my classmates to do that, and that's how I got my A.
That's amazing. I thought that only happened in the movie Clueless. Remember when in the movie Clueless, when Cher would like negotiate her grades? I've never heard that in real life before. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Mr. Rich was his name. And I look back and I've always wondered, because I'll drive by the high school whenever I'm back in San Diego, and I'm like, I wonder if that's still there. Like, if it's, yeah. But Sara, thank you so much for being a part of the PayDestiny podcast. For people who are listening to this, who want to get in touch with you, who want to check out Tercera, how do they do that?
Sure. So Tercera's website is tercera.dev, DEV like Victor. You can look up Tercera Dev on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Sara Inés Calderón. I don't think there's anyone else on LinkedIn with that name. Or you can find me on Twitter. You can look me up by name, or just any of my social handles are Sara Chica D like dog, Sara Chica D. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. But yeah, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I really appreciate you having me here. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. And we will make sure to have all of your handles available and accessible for people to be able to connect with you. Sara, thank you so much for being a part of the PayDestiny podcast today. And I look forward to cheering you on, Tercera on, and making sure to send more people your way. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Adriana.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the PayDestiny podcast with Sara Inés Calderón, an app developer and business owner of Tercera.dev. Make sure to head over to paydestiny.com and enter your email to get notifications for every future episode of the PayDestiny podcast. There, you can also create your free account to access tools that'll help you get a promotion, get a pay raise, and reach your career goals. I'm Adriana Herrera, your PayDestiny podcast host and founder of PayDestiny. Thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to having you back here for another episode of the PayDestiny podcast. Until then, be well and take care.